Well, it's been just a few weeks since Donald Trump took office for a second term, and it's been difficult, if not impossible, to keep up with the slew of measures he's announced since day one. He promised he would make sweeping changes when he returned to the White House, and supporters want to see him deliver on those promises. But opponents suggest the torrent of measures is a deliberate strategy to overwhelm critics and to avoid proper scrutiny.
Tariffs on products from Mexico and Canada later paused. Tariffs on steel and aluminum. Taking over Greenland. Taking over the Panama Canal. Suspending U.S. foreign aid. Taking over Gaza to make it a resort. Shock and awe as U.S. President Donald Trump's first weeks in office feature one surprise announcement after another. It looks a lot like the strategy defined by Trump's former advisor Steve Bannon. The real opposition is the media, and the way to deal with them is to flood the zone. That theory of how to keep the media off balance now seems to be applied to America's allies and to the domestic opposition. There's almost no time to react before the next bombshell comes. Analysts who've spoken to DW see possible upsides and downsides to the strategy. For instance, on Gaza.
The president was either bonkers or bluffing, right? He's either serious and means what he says, or this is some kind of strategic bluster. But if it was strategic, if this was some kind of maximalist offer, that he often does, look, this could be art of the deal, where you start with a wild pie-in-the-sky proposal in order perhaps to create leverage with the Middle East. Maybe it's about Saudi Arabia, normalization deal.
They are designed to keep Trump's critics off their footing, to sow a bit of chaos, to create some distraction. Trump is the absolute master when it comes to dominating news cycles. And it is very, very difficult to discern when he's telling the truth, when it's just bluster. And I think that the entire global community needs to buckle in their seatbelts, because this is who Trump is.
Indeed, Trump's shock and awe make for constant headlines and force world leaders to scramble to keep up. But while Trump notches day-to-day wins, the danger is that the U.S. may end up losing allies. China and Russia have kept largely quiet so far, but both are eager to pull U.S. partners into their orbits.
Cara Alaimo is an associate professor of communication at Fairleigh Dickinson University in the United States. She's also author of the book Over the Influence, which looks at the negative impact of social media on women and girls. Welcome to the day. Do you think that's what's going on with this blizzard of executive orders? Donald Trump is flooding the zone.
Well, I think what Donald Trump is ultimately doing is trying to be America's entertainer-in-chief. And so we saw him recently attend the Daytona 500, a huge racing event. We saw him attend the Super Bowl, one of the biggest sporting events of the year here in the United States. And I think what he's trying to do, what I suspect, is that he's trying to keep our attention off of the policies that he has proposed or is pursuing that are very unpopular with the American people.
So how does he do that? How does he keep our attention off his policies by flooding the news media with his policies?
Well, I think he's also flooding the news media with plenty of entertainment, right? And what he does is he's very skilled at making things all about himself. So we saw, for instance, that he not only attended the Super Bowl, but then afterwards he took to social media and he posted that Taylor Swift, who had, of course, endorsed his rival in the last election, had been booed when she appeared on the screen. Now, it's also the case that some people booed him, but now all of a sudden, anytime people are talking about the Super Bowl, they're often talking about Donald Trump, even though the president usually has nothing to do with this event. And he's also really skilled at using social media in provocative ways. So many of the conversations we have, so much of the reporting that we see in the United States revolves around his social media posts. And that is very, very savvy, Because basically what it's doing is it's making public thought in the United States a reaction to him.
And of course, it's not just the president, but his billionaire sidekick Elon Musk as well, whose Department of Government Efficiency is also causing daily headlines.
That's absolutely right. And Elon Musk is another person who owns a social network and is very, very good at getting attention for himself. I think what's unusual about both men, Trump and Musk, is that they seem to welcome publicity even when it's bad. So we've seen both men do things that would have been considered unthinkable for public figures in the past, but they seem to relish the attention even when people are absolutely outraged by them.
And how effective, then, do you think this strategy is at, one, diluting public outrage or opposition, and two, actually accomplishing Trump's political agenda?
Well, I think it's very effective at keeping people's attention off of what he is pursuing. This is a strategy that is as old as human civilization. We saw back in ancient Rome that leaders would stage things like chariot races and gladiator fights in order to keep the people's attention off of what their leaders were doing. And I think we see that right now because so many Americans disapprove of what Trump is pursuing. So we know that Americans do believe in foreign aid. We know that the majority of Americans do not want ICE agents going into schools. The majority of Americans do not want to end birthright citizenship. The majority of Americans do not want to take over Canada or Gaza.
You say
or
that,
Panama
but
or
the
Greenland.
majority of Americans voted for Donald Trump. So how should Washington institutions react?
Well, Trump did win the last election, but that doesn't mean that Americans agree with a lot of these policies. In fact, we do not. And so if we were smart, both the American people and obviously our leaders would be keeping the public conversation on these policies and proposals and not getting sucked into the latest Trump social media post or to his appearances or other efforts to be our entertainer in chief.
And are they then being effective at combating the entertainment in the entertainer in chief? Because what we seem to see is that the Democrats and Congress effectively doing nothing. There is silence from the Democrats. And anytime they do react, they're seen as reacting rather than pushing their own agenda. He seems to have completely bewildered them.
I think that's absolutely right. I think we need a much more concerted effort by both Democratic lawmakers, but also outcry and responses from the American people to some of these really awful policies that he is proposing or pursuing.
But if there is no outcry, from the American people, might that be because the American people actually enjoy the show and like what he's doing?
To some degree, we know. I mean, this is a former reality television star. He's great at staging a spectacle, and the American people have gotten sucked in. I think that's right. But we also know that public opinion polls do tell us for certain that the American people do not want him to do a lot of the things that he's doing right now. And that's the huge problem. And that's where more action is needed.
And is it only about entertainment, as you put it? What are the other things that this administration is doing differently to other American presidential administrations? Because he does seem to be in a league of his own.
Well, when it comes to communications, the other big thing is his social media posts. And this idea that now he gets to set the public agenda because people react to whatever he posts about. Tim Wu wrote in his book, The Attention Merchants, that is what real power looks like. The ability to set the public agenda, to decide what people are talking about with the content of your tweets. And we've never seen any other president use social media with such frequency and in such a controversial way.
Good talking to you. Thank you for sparing us your time. Cara Alaimo from Fairleigh Dickinson University. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.